I normally would say buckle your seat belts, get ready for a great ride. I don't want to overstate what I'm going to go through for 9 consecutive episodes. Fortunately, they're pretty brief, and so you're not going to have to sit through a long amount of time, but simply to say, I'm going to do something that, if it has been done, I don't know about it. I'm going to trace the origins of the purpose driven church written by Rick Warren and its impact upon the church. I got a lot more to say about that, and I'll have plenty of time to say a lot more. My name is Thom Rayner. I am in my studio, which just happens to be my home office in Franklin, Tennessee. And I am here because we are sponsored by Cheney and Associates. I just want to give you this word. You hear the sponsorship again and again and again, but I just simply want you to hear this word that we don't accept sponsors unless we are on the same page and unless we feel like that we have a similar purpose. Cheney is one of those that we really wanted to come alongside of us. They're the accounting firm for the church. They do it. And listen, folks, you don't need to be doing your accounting. You don't need to be doing your bookkeeping, payroll, etc. Let Cheney do it. You say, well, I don't want to pay for it. Well, believe me, it pays for itself again and again and again. Call our folks at Cheney and Associates or email them. Just go to the website, cheneyassociates.com. Visit that, find out about them, set up an appointment. You will be glad that you did. Now, I am going to talk about a book. It's unbelievable. This book was written 30 years ago. Actually, it was written 29 years ago, but I'm going to say 30 because there's a purpose behind it. Purpose, no pun intended. This book, The Purpose Driven Church, it was written 30 years ago. It was actually published 29 years ago. But from my perspective, we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of this book. More people, I would say, are familiar with the book, The Purpose Driven Life. Oh, that sold 40 million copies. I mean, it was crazy. One of the best selling books ever, much less one of the best selling Christian books ever. But I think, in terms of influence, despite the fact that one sold 40 million and one sold a million, I actually think the purpose driven church was more influential on what is happening in the church today and what is happening in Christianity. And it's for that reason that I'm going to take 9 different episodes. Now, why am I taking 9 different episodes? Well, I want to give an introduction to it being the Purpose Driven Church book. I want to talk about why we talk about 6 purposes when Rick, when he wrote Purpose Driven Church, talked about 5. I want to start talking about the practical benefits of understanding these purposes for your church. And that's the first 3 episodes. And then in subsequent episodes, I'm going to go through each of these 6 purposes, 5 that Rick mentioned, noted, wrote about extensively in his book, and 1 that we later added. So let me take you on a trip. Let's go back to the past. We're not going to go back to the future. We're going to go back to the past. And we're going to go to the year 1994. Now, I know some of you youngsters will say, 1994, I wasn't even alive then. Okay, I wasn't only alive, but I was an adult at that age. So you can tell how old I am now. But in 1994, I received a call from Rick Warren. Rick said, Thom, I'm writing a book. He said, I'm tentatively titling it The Purpose Driven Church. And I wanted a few questions. I had a few questions for Rick. And I said, Rick, I thought your next book would be Cameo, Cameo, because he had been doing a series of conferences on the Cameo Church, contemporary approaches to ministry, evangelism, and organization. And I thought that his next book would be Cameo. So when he said it's called The Purpose Driven Church, it's not that I objected to the title. Obviously, it has done extremely well. But I was surprised that that was the direction that he was going to go. So I'm talking to Rick on the phone in 1994. He wants to know if I'll provide an endorsement. Absolutely. Love Rick Warren. Love what he was doing even then. Back then, it settled back. And said, sure. So eventually, he sent me the manuscript. He sent it by mail. Email was alive back then, but sending downloads was not as common even then. You might send a disc or a diskette, but you didn't send that many downloads. So he sent me the manuscript, arrived in a manila envelope from Saddleback Church in California, and I read it. And I want to tell you, I consumed it eagerly with anticipation and excitement. So when this book came out, The Purpose Driven Church, of course, already knew about it. I was one of many endorsers in here. I mean, the endorsers are kind of like a who's who, and exception would be myself, of course. But some of them are like in memory of. I mean, Jerry Falwell, Robert Schuller, Adrian Rogers, Jack Hayford. Oh my goodness, I'm just looking. Louis Drummond, many of those who've already gone on to be with the Lord, and then many others. W.A. Criswell wrote the forward. Bill Bright. Oh my goodness, all these people. Leonard Sweet, and I'm Lyle Schaller. I just go down the list. There's just so many here. And I was just kind of honored to be a part of this big crowd of people who are providing an endorsement. Even Al Mohler is in there. So I'm seeing him right toward the back and looking at others as well. James Merritt, Jerry Sutton. Oh, the list could go on and on. Larry Osborne. I'm not going to keep on there. But my point was a lot of people read this book before it was released, before it was published, and before Zondervan put the first copy on the market. And I think all of us sensed that there was something about this book that was significant beyond most other books. I know I did. I anticipated the book coming out. I started using it primarily in my doctoral seminars because I wanted I wanted our students to begin to look at this from not just merely an academic or intellectual point of view, but to look at it closely and tell us what they see. And I just got to say, this book is paradigmatic. The Purpose Driven Church book is paradigmatic. At the time, it was the best-selling book on the local church ever. Now, Thom is going to say this with a bit of lack of modesty. The only book that is sold on the local church more than this is my book. I Am a Church Member. Rick's book is sold a little over 1 million. My book is sold almost 2 million. Not that I'm competitive, but just simply to say it is rare to see a book written on the local church with the type of sales of Purpose Driven Church or either my book, I Am a Church Member. So when this book came out, I knew that it was going to make changes in churches. And if it didn't, leaders in churches were not listening. Now, what is the primary thesis of the book, and why are we still talking about it today? Quite frankly, if you go back 30 years and you were in my shoes, I was a new dean at Southern Seminary, dean of the Billy Graham School of Missions and Evangelism at Southern Seminary. And if you were in my shoes, you would have seen the paradigmatic significance of the book. Here's what was going on at the time. Most churches were doing their work, the work of the local church, by program or by some type of routine. Now, the program is wrong, but I'm talking about a routine. More churches were in a rut. More churches were just doing things the way that they have always done them. Along comes the Purpose Driven Church book by Rick Warren. All of a sudden, many church leaders are beginning to ask the question, why do we do what we do? And Rick said it very clearly in his book. What we do needs to be according to the biblical purpose of the church. In his case, the 5 biblical purposes, and we'll add a 6th that I'll talk about later. And so churches began to do things differently. Was it an overnight change? Yeah, in some places it was, in others it was more gradual. But the Purpose-Driven Church became a book that began to change how churches did their work and their ministry, because they were no longer asking the question, what have we done? How have we always done it? Instead, they were saying, why do we do what we're doing? And quite frankly, that is the reason that this church hit a nerve in a positive way. This book, I should say, not this church, that this book hit a nerve in a positive way. It's because it forced us church leaders and those of us who love and talk about the church and write about the church, it forced us to ask the question, are we doing the church work and ministry according to the biblical purposes of the church? You know what? This podcast is over. we've already gone through one, and all we're doing is talking about why we talk about the purpose of the church today. I'm grateful that I'm going to take 3 weeks, 3 podcasts every week, and this is the first of those 3. And we're going to talk about this purpose-driven church book and why it is so significant in the life and the history of the church today. So if you feel like I just got started, I did. I got a lot more to talk about. We'll come back in the next episode, episode 203, and we're going to talk about the purposes themselves. We're going to talk how we landed on 6. Remember, Rick wrote 5, and how we landed on 6. And we'll be talking about that as well. Always remember, we are so appreciative for the accounting firm for the church, Cheney and Associates. Just go to CheneyAssociates.com, set up an appointment with them, find out how they can do your work that you really don't need to be messing with. And come back. For those of you who are viewing on YouTube, I've gotten to where I'm looking at more and more of my YouTube podcasts than I am listening. So thank you. Would you give me a thumbs up and give us a subscription? And if you're still listening on the audio podcast, give us a rating and review. We think that this material that we're going through over these next 9 episodes is going to be important for the church. Well, I'm out of time, past out of time. Come back next for the next episode. It's already downloaded this week, episode 203. We're going to answer the question, how did we land on 6 purposes? All right, see you in the next episode.